And welcome to another episode of Time Out with Doc and Caveman. As always, you are here with Dr. Fantasy and my co-host, the Fantasy Caveman. We are right around the corner from the playoffs. The play-in tournament tips off on April 16th, so that is coming right around the corner. So today we're going to be covering some of the news that's happened in the last week, go over and review the playoff picture. But before we dive into some of that, let's start off with some injury news. It seems like this time of year, every week, we have to dedicate a large section to current injury news. So let's kick it off with the New York Knicks. We talked a little bit last week about how, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, how Josh Hart mentioned that this is the team that we're rolling with for the rest of the year, basically. So I got official word on Julius Randle, who is going to be getting season-ending surgery for his separated shoulder. Obviously, this has a pretty big impact on the Knicks' ability to make it anywhere in the playoffs. So the real question here is, can the Knicks win a first-round matchup without Julius Randle? Do you think that's in the cards for them?
I think it's gonna depend on who they're matched up against. I mean, right now they're lined up to face Cleveland, which can still change because you got Indiana, who actually for the past couple weeks we've been doing this, and Indiana's been in play-in situation, and now they find themselves in the sixth, and they're only a game back of fifth, only a game and a half back of fourth and third, because the Knicks are tied with the Magic. So I mean, we still don't really have any clue who the Knicks' first round opponent's gonna be. I mean, if it's Cleveland, I mean, Cleveland's been on a bit of a tailspin recently, and is not exactly coming into the playoffs playing well. So I think they might be able to beat Cleveland in the first round. I don't think they're good. They'd beat Indiana if that were to happen. If for some reason they fall to sixth in Orlando, so they're obviously they wouldn't beat Boston. They wouldn't beat Milwaukee. I don't think they beat Orlando if they find somehow match up with them. I think they can beat Cleveland, just because I'm a solid believer in momentum coming into the playoffs, and if you're a young team like well, Cleveland's not exactly young, but they have some young pieces. If you're going into the playoffs without much experience and you're going in kind of ice cold, I don't think that's a good recipe. Um, and then I don't think if they end up matching up against Philly, they're not going to beat them. So I mean, the answer is I think maybe Cleveland, but other than that, that's what. And this is what's amazing. Like you look at like these possible like we talk about the West being so much better than the East overall, but we still have all these teams that been in the top 8 really none of them are that bad teams. They are all really solid teams. So, well, I think maybe Cleveland, but I think that might be it.
Yeah, that's probably their best case scenario at this point. I mean, Cleveland has been playing very poor as of late. You got a lot of guys coming back from injury, and it feels like they're just struggling to all click right now. I mean, just on paper, health-wise and just talent-wise, I think the Cavaliers are much better than the Knicks right now. So, me personally, if you put the Knicks up against anybody else that's probably going to make the Eastern Conference playoffs, if we're eliminating the Bulls and the Hawks from the play-in and we have the 76ers and the Heat theoretically, I don't think that there's one team that I personally would favor the Knicks over, or that I would have the Knicks beating in the first round of the playoffs. Now, I mean, could they beat some of those teams? Yeah, I'm sure they could, but I just personally wouldn't pick them. So I think they could be staring down at a one and done kind of year, which I think just based off of the trades they made at the trade deadline and the expectations they've had throughout the year, that would be a super disappointing finish. I think a lot of people thought this was a team that could contend for at least making it to the Eastern Conference. I don't feel like we've ever thought anyone was a serious threat to the Celtics, so I'm not going to go that far, but they were a threat to make it at least to the Eastern Conference Finals, and there's people who were picking them as the second best team in the Eastern Conference, especially after the trade deadline when there was a lot of hype around the moves that they made. So it definitely has an impact. I can't see them making it far without being fully healthy, but at the same time, how far were they really going to make it? Was their upside just losing in the Eastern Conference Finals? I mean, realistically, that's probably what it was.
And the reality is, we're not just talking about this season. If you look forward to their off season coming up, and they are in a very, very difficult situation this off season. So I'm looking at it. So Randle still has 2 more years left on his deal. The 4-year, $117 million deal he signed back in 2021. The final year is a $32.4 million player option. So he can become a free agent in 2025. But here's the problem with them. Randle is extension eligible this offseason. Puts him in a very difficult spot. Jalen Brunson is also extension eligible.
Mm-hmm.
So they're in that. And then Anunoby as a player option for $19 million. He's probably going to decline that. I'd be shocked because he's due for a significant raise in my opinion. And then you got Isaiah Hartenstein is an unrestricted free agent. So I think that's the more disappointing thing is the Knicks had a window this season to make some noise and, kind of make things easier. Because if you make kind of like the model the Golden State has followed and Milwaukee has followed to re-sign some of their guys, if you make a deep run in the playoffs, it gives you hope going forward that, okay, I'm going to pay into the luxury tax to keep our core guys together and, build on this and make a run. The Knicks haven't done jack shit. And now, not only have they not done jack shit, with a team that has potential, they have guys on paper that are good players, and theoretically, they should be able to make a run. But now they're going into a season where they're likely going to be one and done. They got so many decisions to make on these key players. They are in a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they believe this is a core that can win a championship at the end of the day. Because, you have Jalen Brunson, who I think most people believe is the type of star player who, I don't know, I think he can win a championship. Do I think that he can win a championship with the combination of him, Julius Randle, OG Anunoby? I've never been a big Julius Randle guy personally. I don't know if I see that core overcoming the Celtics, which is kind of the question at this point. Like, how do you overcome the Celtics and take over in the Eastern Conference? So it's going to be interesting just from a team building perspective to see who they choose to pair alongside Jalen Brunson. Is this a winning combination? And they're going to have to start making some of those decisions this offseason. So let's head into just some generic news, and then we'll talk more about the playoff picture and what's going on and what's upcoming for the next week. The first thing, just a little side note here, Malachi Flynn of I was going to say the Toronto Raptors, but he's on the Detroit Pistons, 4th-year guard out of San Diego State. He was a late first-round pick in 2020. He's actually on his 3rd team this season, fun fact. He scored 50 points off the bench, so just another day at the office. And I mean, the Pistons are super banged up right now, but I mean, it's still of note when, a guy like that scores 50 points off the bench. So is there anything to be made of this?
That it's just a very just fun, just kind of out of left field kind of random 50-point game. I mean, looking at it, he had the lowest scoring average from someone who dropped 50 points in a game. Scoring, he's averaging 5.2 points per game this season, so he's not exactly doing much. And now he ranks only behind Jamal Crawford, who's arguably the best sixth man of all time, for the most points scored off the bench in a single NBA game. So that's just so random and out there. And what makes it even more random is he followed that performance up by playing 23 minutes and going 0-12 from the field and 0-7 from 3. So
very consistent.
So I just found that's just such an odd. I mean, that just means anybody can pop off at any night. I mean, he didn't even. If he was like, if they were so banged up that he had to start and like, okay, no, he just got hot and just kind of, he's at least in the starting lineup, but like, to come off the bench and drop 50 when you're a relatively unknown guy, I mean, it's just odd, but it's at the same time it's kind of cool, and it's just it's fun to see.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, that's going to be the crowning achievement of his entire career. I mean, if we're just being realistic about it, but it's a cool story for him to be able to say. And taking it even a step further, you mentioned that 0 for 12 game. Then the next game, he went 1 for 7 from the field. So since that game, he is 1 for 19 from the field and 1 for 12 from 3. After going 18 for 25 in one game. So it just makes it more and more bizarre, but cool for him. Not really meaningful in the grand scheme of things, but still cool for him. Let's go to another guy who we mentioned last week. That is Mr. LeBron James Jr., Bronny James himself. Was in the news for a few different reasons because he entered the transfer portal and then entered the NBA draft, and now everybody is confused when it's really not that confused. Every time I see a comment in social media, people are confused, like, what is he actually doing? But yeah, Bronny has entered the transfer portal and entered the NBA draft pool. So what do you think he's most likely to do? How do you think this is going to shake out?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of frustrating how, I don't know what word I want to use, stupid, that some,
okay.
I mean, I
I didn't know where you're going with that, but
I was
okay.
trying to find what word, but that's reality, like you just gotta, like, have common sense, like, he's doing this, he's entering the NBA draft to, get feedback at the combine, basically, and be like, okay, where do the scouts think that he could go in the draft? That's all he's doing. And very interesting that, from the reports that I've been reading, the scouts are very 50-50 on him.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know, they don't know, basically. And in my opinion, if the scouts are that split, maybe it's not such a good idea to end up making the jump and going into the NBA if the scouts are so split. But at the same time, whether it's fair or not, he is LeBron James's kid, and that alone will probably get him drafted in the first round somewhere. Because he's LeBron James's kid. I think that is the reality, as we've been saying, whoever drafts Bronny is going to get LeBron too. So, with that being said, I think ultimately what's going to happen, I think him entering the transfer portal is more interesting and more relevant news. Because it doesn't seem, I don't know if it's their development. I just don't. It kind of felt like USC just like wasn't the right program for him. I don't know. I don't know if that's it, but like I just think he might. I think he goes somewhere else, and if he gets more, I don't know, more control of the team or more, opportunities to kind of, flourish and develop. And we mentioned this last week. And well, you mentioned it specifically. Like he's very good defensively. He plays with a lot of tenacity. So if he develops his offensive game, I mean, I think you could be talking about like a lottery pick, but he's gonna have to go to the right program to develop. So the transfer portal is probably the more relevant news.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, you don't see a lot of players, I guess, or maybe we're just not publicly talking about a lot of players entering the transfer portal and the NBA draft pool at the same time. But I actually think he's going to the NBA, if we're being honest about it. So, you mentioned, is he a first round pick even with the LeBron factor? I don't know. That's tough. I mean, I'm trying to think like if I'm the Boston Celtics towards the end of the first round, is LeBron going to the Celtics if I take Bronny? Like, can you imagine LeBron going to the Celtics for a year somehow? So
LeBron will go wherever Bronny gets drafted.
No, he will, but I mean, that's why he probably would go in the first round, because even imagine like the Nuggets at the end of the first round being like, hey, we'll take LeBron for a year. And even like outside of basketball, what LeBron's going to bring to a team for that year. Also, just from like a business standpoint, right? I mean, how much money does LeBron coming to your team bring you even for one season, just in ticket sales and jersey sales? And so it feels like a business decision to me to just draft Bronny at the end of the first. But the other thing that I just think from a playing perspective, I've seen a lot of different opinions on where he ranks according to scouts, but one interesting take that I think it was Richard Jefferson had, and I kind of like his thought process and his take on it, was that Bronny is the type of player with the type of skill set that he has that will be better in the NBA than in college basketball. So when we're looking at Bronny, we want to see someone who's like offensively gifted and taking over games and averaging 20 points. Let's just get real. Like, that's not the type of player he is. He's not going to be an all-star level player. I mean, maybe he develops into a fringe kind of all-star or a starting player in the NBA, but realistically, he's going to be the type of guy that gives you tough minutes off the bench, playing great defense. He's not a terrible three-point shooter, so if he develops a better three-point shot, you're talking about like a really high-end sixth man, in my opinion. And usually those types of players, I mean, they just don't put up these big, gaudy college basketball numbers. So I think if he goes to another program, I don't think he's going to take over and develop this crazy offensive game. It almost serves him better to play a year with his dad, who is probably the best coach that he could have at this point, get drafted by a really strong team like the Celtics, like the Nuggets, because realistically, he's going to a playoff team towards the end of the first round. So you're talking an NBA coaching staff, being around talented players who are going to be able to coach him up. I think that he's going to the NBA, honestly, and I think I'm in the minority to believe that, but I think his skill set is almost better served for the NBA at this point, and I think that it just makes sense.
Yeah, I think it really is like a 50-50 at this point. But I mean, the thing is, like, if he stays in college and goes to another program, can he develop more skills than to be just being beyond a high-end sixth man in the NBA? Like, can he develop an offensive game to where he's a starting caliber guy? So I think that's kind of where, that's kind of the whole interesting point about this. I think LeBron, like Bronny right now in the NBA could definitely carve out a good role and could be a solid bench guy, in the league. But, does he want to, be more than that? And I think that kind of, it comes with the pressure of being LeBron James's kid. I mean, people look at him, if your dad is LeBron James and all you can muster up is to be a best case scenario is you're a high end sixth man, and you're, so I think that's kind of, I think that might play like a bit of a factor here. Is if Bronny's trying to not become his dad, because the reality is nobody's ever gonna be LeBron James in the league ever again, probably. But does he want to hold up? I don't know if prestige is the word, but carry on LeBron, it'd be tougher to do that, in the kind of that sixth man, not being able to be a star player.
Yeah, and I mean LeBron, and I think Bronny might have said it as well, that it's all about his development at the end of the day. You can also argue the other side, that is it better for him to be playing in college games for his development, or is it better to be going up and practice against Jason Tatum and high level NBA players on a daily basis? So I mean, for me, if you can crack a roster and be practicing against the very best every single day, to me it would seem like that's the best way to develop your skills. But I think that's a fair point. At the end of the day, it's, if he even is going to be a late second round pick, I mean, I think he's going to the NBA at the end of the day, just because I feel like they would make the determine. I mean, LeBron skipped college basketball completely, so clearly he doesn't see the value in college basketball. But anyway, that's enough on Bronny. Let's stick to, or head over to something that you sent me over today on Klay Thompson. So there's been some news rumors saying that Orlando wants Klay Thompson to go there. They have a very young core. They're willing to pay, I believe the tweet that you sent me was a bunch of money to bring Klay Thompson
Very
to.
specific.
Yeah, a bunch of money. I don't know. I mean, a bunch of money, a few $100s is a bunch of money to me. So what exactly does that mean? But yeah, so kind of interesting. And I believe that tweet also said that it was one of the worst kept secrets. So it sounds like people are kind of aware that the Magic want to aggressively pursue Klay Thompson. So what do you think from Klay Thompson's perspective? Does this make sense? And then from Orlando's perspective, does this make any sense?
I mean, I think it may kind of make sense on both sides of the equation. I mean, if you're Klay Thompson, I mean, for one, you're gonna probably, my guess is he'd get more money playing with Orlando than he would, if he decided to re-sign with Golden State. And so I'm never gonna fault an athlete for chasing money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a no-brainer. That's the case with any job. Like, if I'm offered a job that pays double or triple more than what I'm making now, that's a no-brainer. But I mean, but for me, I prefer him to stay in Golden State. I mean, as a basketball fan, I kind of want to see him and Steph, go out together. But the fit in Orlando would be good. I mean, you got to look at the team. What does Orlando need? They have a very good defensive team.
Mm-hmm.
We've been saying this all year. It's the reason why they're they're as good as they are, and we're going to talk about them more when we go over the standings in general. But did they were to add a guy like Klay Thompson, who, yeah, he's having a bit of a down season, but he could still get some buckets for you. He is still in him to shoot around 40% from three, for the season, and Orlando doesn't have a ton of 3-point shooting. So they had a guy like Klay Thompson. They have a bunch of young guys too. Klay Thompson would be a great mentor for all the young guys there. So I think it'd be a good fit, but I prefer Klay Thompson to stay in Golden State just because I want him and Steph to ride out together.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of depends on what the definition of a bunch of money is here. So, from like a financial standpoint, looking at what the Magic are paying out right now, they're kind of in an interesting financial situation because they don't have one player next season that's guaranteed to make over $12 million. They can cut ties with Jonathan Isaac with no dead cap hit. Markelle Fultz is going to be off the book. Gary Harris at $13 million is off the book. So they have a lot of financial flexibility next year, and nobody on their roster right now is over. Well, Joe Ingles is technically on the roster at 36, but besides him, of people that are getting regular minutes, the oldest guy is Gary Harris at 29, and then everyone else is like 25 and younger. So from a team perspective, Klay Thompson's shooting and defensive ability does fit in. It makes a lot of sense for them to bring in a veteran presence to be a leader amongst these young guys. I never like giving an older guy a long contract for a bunch of money, but if Klay Thompson comes in for 2 years, even if they're paying him like 25 million, I like that seems crazy to pay him that much, but if it's a short like 2-year deal, even 3 years feels like too long to me, then I can get behind it. I think it makes sense. This feels like the type of team that needs to draft Bronny and bring LeBron in. If we're being real about it, like you add LeBron to this young core to lead some of these guys, I think it would be super powerful. Not to mention, I mean, there's no state income tax for LeBron moving there. It's nice to be in Florida again. Like it's you start thinking about some of the elements. You're like, man, could the Magic win a championship with LeBron on there? I mean, I think you'd have to consider it. So I think they're just in an interesting position right now. They have a lot of financial flexibility. I don't know if they're going to be extending any of these young guys. Maybe Paulo this upcoming off season if they want to do it a year early. But yeah, they're in a really interesting financial situation, and we'll see how that develops moving forward. So let's head over to. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I was
Okay.
like, I didn't know.
I heard you muttering to yourself that you couldn't hear me, so I was like, I better check before I keep moving forward.
You get frozen, and I couldn't hear you anymore.
Yeah, I was just talking about the Magic and LeBron going to the Magic. But yeah, just overall, they are in an interesting position to bring in some sort of veteran leader because of that financial flexibility. So, I mean, Klay Thompson makes sense. I wouldn't do it for 5 years or anything wild like that. But if it's a 2 or 3 year deal, it probably does make sense for them to do, especially being in the position that they're in financially. The last bit of Well, before we start talking about the playoffs, we'll talk about Mr. Gilbert Arenas, who does like a little bit of controversy himself. He's been known a time or two to be in the news for non-basketball things. So he made a comment a few days ago that Nikola Jokic is the worst MVP in the last 40 years. And a lot of people did not like him saying that. So, Caveman, do you agree with him?
I mean, I know Jokic is kind of more your guy, but your style of guy. But I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, and I know we had who did we have last week or whatever? Saying something stupid. and
Well, there's always somebody.
yeah, well, it's like I don't know what's up with these former NBA players saying such outlandish things, and I mean, and I'm looking at his like reasoning, like he's talking about he's talking about he's talked about Michael Jordan's '88 season where he averaged 35, 6-5 with 3 steals and finished with the 7th best record. And then the puzzling one is he talked about Russell Westbrook's 2017 MVP season. Because the first player to average a triple double for a full season since Oscar Robertson. And Gilbert Arenas basically said Jokic has won MVPs because he's a big man that gets triple doubles. And that's kind of the thing. I mean that's so that his argument is so like bad, like because he used the Westbrook season in 2017 to support his argument. But what happens if? So here's the thing: what happens if Russell Westbrook averages 1 less rebound and 1 less assist, and doesn't end up with a triple double? I believe that season. Looking at it, James Harden averaged 29, 8, and 11 that season and they won 55 games, that Rockets team. Westbrook during that season, I believe they won the Thunder because that was the season after Kevin Durant left. Mm-hmm. I believe they won like 45 games or something like that. Like they barely made the playoffs. So I mean, you can't really use that triple double argument against Jokic. That's what you're trying to do, but you're trying to use it to support your case with Westbrook, but not with Jokic. I mean, I'm not. And he basically said he claimed there was nothing special or historic about Jokic averaging 26, 10, and 8 in 2021 or 27, 13, and 8 in 2022. I mean, that's just dumb. Like, I mean, I can't think of any other way to put it.
So I didn't read his entire argument, I guess, but was he saying like Jokic as a player or the season that he had?
He was basically saying there was nothing. Jokic didn't do anything special or historic during his 2 MVP seasons.
Yeah, I mean that seems maybe a little. I don't know, historic. What is the definition of a historic? I guess.
That's the thing. Like, he did nothing. Here's the thing. He said he did nothing special or historic by almost averaging a triple double, but then he used the Westbrook argument. He used Westbrook to support his argument. But if Westbrook averages 1 rebound and 1 assist less, then he doesn't average a triple double. And by that, his logic shouldn't win MVP, which is ridiculous. I think even if Westbrook averaged 1 less rebound and 1 less assist, he 1,000% should have won MVP that year for what he was able to do with OKC without Durant. So I mean, like his argument is so like flawed and stupid.
Well, I think that's probably fair. I mean, it is kind of crazy because it got me looking earlier today through just like historically who's been the NBA MVP. And it's crazy seeing like there really hasn't been very many like random guys to win MVP. In most other sports, if you went through like MLB's MVP list, there's a guy that had a random big season and then disappeared and you never heard from him again. But when you look at like over history, it's like Michael Jordan and Shaq and AI and Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett and Dirk and Kobe and LeBron. It's like, holy cow, like it's all only legends. I mean, among all the last MVPs, probably just the least successful career guys, or of course AI because he's a bum, but besides AI, Derrick Rose. I mean, Steve Nash averaged 15 points if you want to talk about a non-historic season. Both of Steve Nash's were very underwhelming. Yes, he averaged over 10 assists both those years, but I mean, I have a hard time putting Jokic below either one of Steve Nash's MVP years, and there's already one that's clouded in controversy because Kobe didn't win it anyway. Even Steph Curry's first MVP, he only averaged 23 points. So I mean, there's been some that haven't been as spectacular as others. So if you were really to rank like Jokic's seasons compared historically to everybody else, they have to be like upper middle, I would say, worst case. If you're just looking at the season. Now, if you wanted to talk about like the players in that conversation, I wouldn't necessarily, if you put Jokic towards the bottom of a lot of those names, I probably wouldn't fault you, especially he's not like a sexy player. Like he puts up big numbers, but you watch him and he's just a big goofball. You wouldn't be like that guy isn't an NBA superstar. So yeah, I could see where his argument is flawed, but it is just interesting to look at MVP seasons historically and how it's varied so much and how it's evolved over time. So yeah, it's an interesting thought and conversation to have.
Yeah, and I mean we're also ignoring. We've been talking about like most of his argument was stats and numbers and whatnot, but
yeah,
one of the biggest criteria when it comes to MVP voting, in my opinion, is just the quote unquote eye test. And to think about like the thing with Jokic is Jokic can literally do anything you ask him to do. Like,
oh yeah,
you need Jokic to go and drop 40 in a game if that's what it calls for. He can do that. If you need him to take 5 shots but get 15 assists, be the facilitator for a game, he can do that. He can. You need him to go full on like Dane time down the stretch and just come up with all your clutch buckets, in the fourth quarter. He can do that. And it's like he so it's like, what are we doing? Like I'm not like the biggest Jokic fan. Like, I am definitely among the people that think his game is boring and, he's not very exciting to watch. But even I'm able to recognize, how good his game is and how impactful he is on the game. So it's just like, what are we doing here? Like,
I don't know. I ask myself that every single morning. All right, I think that's it on news. We'll talk a little bit later too on just the Hall of Fame class, but I do want to make sure that we talk about the playoff picture here a little bit. So let's head over to talking about some of the just what the standings look like. Most teams have 3 or 4 games remaining, so we're right there. We're looking at the home stretch. So let's start with the Eastern Conference. We've talked about a few of these teams already. So the top 10 are locked in. Now, where those teams are going to be in the top 10 is a completely different conversation. And even starting at top, if we're being honest about it, the Celtics, I
yeah.
think, are probably locked in as the number 1 seed. It might be safe to say
sure?
that, being 15 games ahead of the Bucks, who are the 2 seed. But even starting at the 2 seed, the Bucks have played like such garbage recently that the Magic, they are very bad right now. And you want to talk about,
talk about a team going in with no momentum.
yeah, I mean that's definite.
They lost the other night to the Raptors, who are on a 15-game losing streak, and they just got like blown out of their own building by a Toronto Raptors team who is missing like 10 guys.
Yeah, it's getting embarrassing if we're being honest about it. So that's opened up an opportunity for the Orlando Magic, who are only 1 game behind the Milwaukee Bucks right now for the number 2 seed. Technically, the Knicks are only 1 game behind the Bucks for the 2 seed. The Cavs, who are currently sitting in 5th, are only a game and a half behind the Bucks for the 2 seed. So any of those teams technically the Pacers are 2.5 games behind the Bucks. That one would be a little more difficult, but really any of the 2, 3, 4, or 5 seeds, all of that can change, and then the Pacers can move up and realistically to 3, 4, 5, 6. They can also drop down into the play-in. The 76ers as the 7 seed are currently 1 game behind the Pacers. You have the Heat, who are 1.5 games behind the Pacers for the 6 seed. And then you have the Bulls and Hawks a little further down. They're going to be the 9 and 10 seeds playing one another for a win-or-go-home game in the play-in tournament. So a lot of moving pieces here. It's going to be interesting to see where it all lines up, and it obviously has a lot of impact to see who's going to be playing who in the first round.
Okay, and here's the most interesting part, especially that race for number 2. So Bucks have 4 games remaining, right? 2 are against Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, Orlando controls their own destiny, right?
Orlando controls their own destiny for number 2. So Milwaukee has a home game versus Boston. Then they home to Orlando. Then the Bucks, the second last game, go to OKC. And then to Orlando to finish up the season. Like, it doesn't get much more of a more difficult final stretch for Milwaukee, and you're talking about, them only a game ahead of. So, who has a tiebreaker right now? It really doesn't mean a whole lot between Orlando and Milwaukee, because their tiebreaker is going to be decided by these final 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it goes head to head first, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes to so basically their tiebreaker is going to be determined. I think the most likely scenario for number 2 is going to come down to that final game. The winner of that final game of the regular seasons. I think that's going to determine who the number 2 seed in Eastern Conference is going to be. I mean, yeah, the Knicks could catch one of them, but Knicks would be, honestly, it'd be like the worst number 2 seed in the history.
Wow, that's harsh.
I mean but like we talked about them, they probably won't even make it out of the first round. You're talking about number 2 seed, they don't have a shot at winning in the first round. That's wild. But I mean, that's kind of what jumps out at me, in Eastern Conference. I mean, you already mentioned. I mean, I guess technically 9 and 10 is interesting because they're only a game separates them. So Bulls are only a game up on Atlanta, and I guess they're fighting for who hosts that 9-10 game.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's something, I guess. Who gets to host that game? Who gets to make a final bit of money for their for the franchise? But I mean, like you said, even the 7-8 race is interesting. If it stands, I mean, Philly's on a bit of a roll, so I wouldn't be surprised if and even Indiana's on a bit of a roll too, and they're 7-3 in their last 10. So the seeding is going to be very interesting. I don't, nobody knows. I mean, like I said, outside of Boston at number 1, like nobody else is locked into their positions. Milwaukee, with how they're playing, could fall all the way to 5.
That would be
and that
insane.
Sounds insane, but the way they're playing and who they have left to play, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. They're on a free fall right now. They're lost 4 in a row, including like a loss to like the Wizards and the Raptors in their 2 games. Like, what? So that'd be crazy to think Milwaukee could slide all the way down to 5.
Yeah, definitely it's possible. I mean, do you think that based on how things are shaking out right now in the East with the Sixers on a roll and Embiid coming back, that the 76ers are the most likely to be a threat to the Celtics / play them in the Eastern Conference Finals?
Oh, man, this is I mean, for basically the entire season up until this final stretch, I was still, a believer in my Bucks and saying they're the number. But like, if we're being real, who could make an argument for that right now?
Yeah.
The way Milwaukee has been playing, like, talk about limping into the playoffs. Like they're going into the playoffs on life support. And if they don't like find themselves quickly, you're talking about as of right now, they're matched up against Philly in the first round.
Yeah,
Like,
that's not good.
I don't know if, and this is crazy, even as of a couple weeks ago, you wouldn't even think about saying this, but I think there's actually a possibility Milwaukee's one and done.
Mm-hmm.
And, would I, if I had to bet, like, I always go to the ultimatum. Like, I had to bet everything I own and bet my life savings and, all my possessions. Do I think Milwaukee would get bounced in the first round? I mean, I don't think I would take that bet, but I don't feel very confident about it. If I was forced, I do think Milwaukee. Don't think Milwaukee gets bounced in the first round.
Even if they play the 76ers. That's got to be like worst case scenario, right?
That's got to be like, I'd rather. I mean, or
I don't know. I mean, they always struggle against the Heat too, but
even if it's not you got Miami right there. Like, I would definitely, if I was the Bucks, would rather play Indiana or play. Even though Indiana, Bucks are in a horrible. The Indiana's had their number all year.
Yeah, they look good right now too.
They look good.
Yeah.
I would like Cleveland to fall. I would like Cleveland to fall to, I almost would rather Milwaukee fall to 3 and Cleveland fall to 6 because Cleveland's playing just about as bad as Milwaukee is right now. So, I mean, I think Milwaukee could definitely beat Cleveland in the first round based on how, but the Bucks are looking very shaky and are on life support. And I think that's probably, the overall biggest story going into the playoffs in the East is just, the downfall it seems of Milwaukee. Like we know Orlando is gonna be good. We know Orlando, whoever they face, is gonna be a tough out. I think, as of right now, they're facing Indiana, and I think, I think I would take Orlando in the first round over Indiana. Even though Indiana is playing well, I think for the season as a whole, Orlando's, been together this entire season and kind of have same group of guys, and they play so good defensively, and Indiana, does not play very well defensively, and
yeah, not great. Yeah, it's interesting too. The seeding does start to matter a little bit too. So if you start looking at, except the Celtics, the Bucks and Magic have the 2 best home records, the Bucks and Magic. Their away record, they both are the only top 8 team with losing away records, the Bucks and Magic. So home court advantage starts to become pretty important for those teams too. But yeah, it's interesting just thinking about where the Bucks rank in the Eastern Conference right now. If I was to rank who I'm most confident in right now, I think they would probably be third to last right now if we're looking at the top 8 seeds. I think I'd put the Knicks and Cavs below them. And then I think I'd put the Bucks there. That sounds very harsh, and then probably the Magic right above them there. But that sounds harsh, but I just feel like the 76ers are getting healthy. Tyler Hero just came back for the Heat, so the Heat are starting to get healthy at the right time, and you just don't want to play them this time of year. So that sounds crazy, but that's kind of the situation we're in.
Great, but the Bucks do have a chance before the season. They do have two. Like we said, they do have 2 games versus Orlando.
Yeah, it's not over.
So let's say they go and beat Orlando, both of these games, I think that definitely is a good enough, good enough reason to prop them up to give them at least something. I think if they're able to fend off Orlando for number 2 going into the season, being on how big of a downward spiral they've been on, I think that's at least gives them some, momentum going in. But if they don't figure it out and they go in, let's say out of these games, and they got one, they got that's not the Knicks. They just played the Knicks, right? Who they have Boston. I mean, and I don't even know. Boston's playing on a roll. I mean, you think Boston, 15-game lead on, the first place in the East, but Boston's looking towards the finals, and even then they're not even in any danger. Like, if Boston makes it to the final, they're hosting that.
Yeah.
They have home court, like, if you're looking at percentages wise. So Boston has no reason to be doing as good as they're doing right now and being on the roll that they're on. And Milwaukee, it's really realistic. We could be talking about, especially with them also playing OKC, and Milwaukee could be going into the playoffs on like an 8-game losing streak and going from being the second team all season to down so that's the story, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of seeding to be decided, but this Milwaukee Bucks downfall has to be like studied.
Yeah, it's it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I mean, I said it forever ago and we talked about it forever ago, but still the reality for the Bucks season is it all comes down to how they perform in the playoffs. If they magically turn it around and somehow make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and even the finals and have a deep run, then we're going to forget that this conversation even happened.
That is true.
At the end of the day. So we can and maybe we are overreacting, but I do tend to agree with you that momentum matters. It's not irrelevant, and they have a week before the regular season ends to try to build something up, and definitely sweeping the Magic could go a super long way just to build up that confidence a little bit. But not a lot of optimism around the Bucks right now. So let's head over to the Western Conference. Once again, the top 10 teams are locked in, with the Rockets officially being eliminated. But once again, a lot of interesting seeding conversations to have here. So already starting at the top, the Timberwolves and Nuggets are dead tied with the same exact record right now for the number 1 seed. I believe as of today, the Timberwolves do have the tiebreakers, so they would be the number 1 seed. And then you have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are kind of struggling right now without Shea as the 3 seed, but holding on, only a game behind the Timberwolves and Nuggets. Then going down, you have the Clippers, who are 4 games behind the 1 seed, 3 games behind the Thunder. And the 5 seed, we have the Mavericks, who are 2 games behind the Clippers. You have the Suns, who are 2 games behind the Mavericks. And then looking at the play-in situation right now, the Pelicans and Suns actually have the same record, but the Suns have the tiebreaker right now. So the Pelicans find themselves in the 7 seed. The Kings are only a game back behind the Pelicans and the Suns. You have the Lakers, who are only a game and a half back from the Suns, so can easily find themselves in the top 6. And then you have the Warriors, who are 3 games behind the Suns. So uphill battle, not really likely that they're going to find themselves out of the play-in tournament. But it's kind of interesting just how much movement there could be over the last 4 or 5 games of the season here, with teams falling in and out of the play-in tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of, the West, like we've been talking, is very uber competitive. I mean, we've been talking about who has the best chance to come out of the West, and talk about how it could be 8 different teams to come out of the West, and that's, still the case. We were talking as of like a week or 2 ago, Dallas was, in the play-in as like the 7 seed. And now, Dallas is firmly entrenched into not having to play in the play-in. And I believe they are the hottest team in the league right now over their last 10. Anyways, they are 9-1 in their last 10 with their only loss, I believe, coming to Golden State, I believe, in their last 10 games. So I mean, I still stand by Dallas. If I'm picking a team to come out of the West, I mean, it's still Dallas for me. I mean, just the other night, I mean, Luka and Kyrie did a masterful job leading leading a comeback. Forgot who it was first. Oh, it was over the Rockets. They came from behind and won 147 to 136 in overtime. But Kyrie did drop a season high 48
Yeah.
in that game. And then Luka, that Luka bum didn't get a triple double though. He only had 37, 9, and 12. That fell a rebound short of a triple double, which, I mean, that makes him a bum. But I mean, that's Dallas is still the team to beat, and I mean, I guess remember we've been talking talk about like the Pelicans being kind of the only team in the top that doesn't really have a chance of coming out of the West, and now we're seeing the Pelicans who for the last several weeks are avoiding the play-in, and now they find themselves in the play-in. So it'll be interesting. I mean, and this has been the case for a while now, the only downside I see right now is either LeBron James or Steph Curry you're not going to see in the actual playoffs. The one of them is going to be one and done. Not necessarily LeBron, actually. Because, they could still... with 4 games to go, they get a game and a half, almost 2 games. I wouldn't count on that.
Yep.
So, but, they are only a half a game ahead of... behind Sacramento. So there's still... I guess there could be a scenario where both LeBron and Steph make the actual playoffs, which I would love to see that. But
the NBA wants to see it too. Don't worry.
NBA wants to see it. The NBA, sorry, the Pelicans and Kings, you're just not wanted in the top 8.
I hope the Lakers and the Warriors miss personally, but
who wants that?
I do.
You do clearly. But and as long as the Warriors make it, I don't know if I'd pick them, but do I think the Warriors could, let's say Timberwolves end up, because they have the tiebreaker right now. Let's say the Timberwolves end up as number 1 and the Warriors sneak in there, win their 2 games to claim the 8th seed. I think Golden State has a chance to beat Minnesota in the first round.
Oh, that's hateful. I don't like. That's hateful.
You got to think the Warriors, they have been playing a lot better down the stretch. They're 7-3 in their last 10. Draymond Green's been playing really well. So, anything could happen. So, it's just gonna be fun. Like we said, the seeding for the most part, with the gaps 3 between number 3 and number 4, 2 between 4 and 5. I guess the only 6 through 9 is kind of where you could see some possible movement, but that's kind of where the interesting thing as far as seeding goes. But it's all about in the West is who's actually going to come out of it.
Yeah.
You know, I think, and that's kind of the storyline.
Yeah, there's a bunch of interesting things going on here, and you mentioned the Mavericks, how impressive they've been, 14-2 over their last 16 games, just on an absolute tear right now. The Lakers are 8-2 over their last 10. You know, they've looked really, really good recently. That's a team that you don't want to play right now come playoff time. It feels like the type of team that is a 7 or 8 seed.
Although AD did just re-aggravate an eye injury.
Well, you know, that's just another day at the office for him at this point. But yeah, I think one of the interesting things that you didn't mention as well, because I think you rounded up and talked a lot about a lot of things. Well, before I get to that point, I guess first, it feels like the top 6 teams right now in the conference, the way that it's settled, it feels like the 6 best teams in the conference.
It does.
And
Yeah.
I think it's appropriate for the Pelicans, Kings, Lakers, and Warriors to fight it out in the play-in tournament. So I kind of hope it stays as is, because I just feel like it's fair how it's shaked out in the.
So I want the Lakers to jump the Kings, so we have a possibility of both LeBron and Steph in the actual playoffs.
We shall see. I always like to see a changing of the guard. I think it would be cool to see the Pelicans.
It's not
and
time yet, okay?
I'm ready for it, okay? And
It's
that's
not
all that
time
matters.
yet.
The other kind of interesting thing is just the MVP race comes down to really Western Conference players at this point. And I mean, there's a lot of people who think that Luka has moved himself into a position to win MVP. With the way that the Mavericks have been on an absolute tear, he's at least put himself in the conversation. I mean, the guy is averaging 34 points almost, with almost 10 assists and 9 rebounds, somewhere around. Like, he's almost averaging a triple double with 34 points. So he deserves to at least be in the conversation with the way that that team is playing. Not that Kyrie hasn't been important, because obviously he has been, but Luka has also just been insane during that run. You have Jokic, who has been playing his best basketball against in big games recently. And then, ironically enough, I think with Shea missing the last 5 games, his MVP case, in my opinion, is getting stronger. Because I think sometimes people underrate how important he is to the Thunder. They're like, oh, Chet's been good, and you know they've just been a really good, well-rounded team. They look lost right now without Shea. They're
They
one
did
and
just win their last game, though.
they did. That was the first game they won without Shea. They're 1-4 now without him, and I've watched 2 of those games. And I'm going to be honest, they just look lost without him. And I know Jalen Williams has been
team right now.
out. Yeah, that's not good. Chet has not looked good. It proves to me that Chet is just, especially right now, he's not a number 1 guy that you want to run an offense through.
they beat the Hornets.
Yeah, that's something to really write home about there, beating the Hornets. But I think this is just an interesting part of the conversation as well. Is, you know, if the Thunder can scrap together a few wins and finish tied for the 1 seed or be the 1 seed, or I don't know, if they continue to struggle with Shea, me personally, you know, you could say there's value in Shea playing and putting up big numbers, but I think the one question mark that people have seen is like, well, aren't the Thunder just a really well-rounded team? I mean, we had a conversation 2 weeks ago about someone questioning whether or not Shea was even a superstar. And, you know, obviously I don't think people are saying that, but I don't think people are giving him enough credit for where the Thunder are right now. And to me, it's just put an exclamation mark on how important he is with the way that they've been playing. And I think part of that is he's a quiet superstar. Like, based on what you read about him, is just he's very Kobe-like, it sounds like, in terms of just him pushing guys and having an intense mentality in practice, but he's just very quiet and goes about his business. And
you did say you saw him in a commercial, so you know.
yeah, I mean, him and Chet are singing together in AT&T commercials now, so that makes him a superstar. But yeah, I think that'll be another interesting thing to monitor over the last week of the season. The MVP race, you could argue, is still open. To me, it feels like it's going to be a pretty open race. I don't see Jokic like sweeping the field, even if a lot of people think that he's the favorite right now. So I think that'll be fun to see what shakes up with that as well.
Yeah, and you did, just to mention before, you know, we wrap things up here. I mean, it's not like the Thunder exactly have had an easy road without Shea. I mean, look at their 3 games. They lost at Philly, at Boston, at Indiana. So not exactly the easiest stretch of games. And,
That's fair.
even with Shea, I don't know if there's a guarantee they win those games anyways. So, I think, that's of interest to note. I mean, I do think it's still open in a sense, but I keep going back to if I had to bet all my money on something, it's probably on Jokic winning. If I was forced, even though it feels like I think it should make his case stronger than missing these last few games and how the Thunder have looked. But I think it goes back to like the best ability is availability, which I think kind of sounds dumb sometimes.
And
But
he said it anyway.
I think in the eyes of like the MVP voters, I think that's gonna matter. I think that unfortunately it shouldn't be the case, but I think this stretch of missed games for Shea might cost him the MVP award.
Yeah, and it did feel like he was starting to take the lead right before then. So, yeah, I mean, he's only played 4 less games than Jokic, so it feels a little silly to me still because it's really not that many games. But, yeah, I think that's it on the playoff race. So when we talk next week, I believe everything's going to be set in stone. We'll be able to talk about the play-in tournament and some of those matchups that are upcoming, so that'll be fun. But to wrap it up quickly here with some other, just guess last piece of news, the NBA released their Hall of Fame class this week, which included 13 inductees, which is a crazy high number. The biggest names of note, you have some old school guys and Michael Cooper, Walter Davis, Charles Smith, Bo Ryan, who's a coach at Wisconsin, and then Chauncey Billups and Vince Carter, which always makes me feel a little old because guys that I grew up playing are now making it into the Hall of Fame, and you're like, holy cow, like, how did that happen? But any notes that you want to bring up on some of these Hall of Famers?
I mean, if we're being real honest about it, outside of Vince Carter and Chauncey Billups, I don't know a whole bunch about anybody else.
That's fair.
Because I wasn't alive in the 60s and 70s to watch these
Really?
guys.
You had me fooled. No.
So, I mean, I know these players. Like I know, looking them over, they all have a good case. Like if you just look at numbers and look at impact and whatnot,
Yeah.
they do all have a case. But like for me, like you resonate with Vince Carter and Chauncey Billups, and the reality is that both of them 1,000% deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, Vince Carter. This is just wild to me. He's the only player in NBA history to play in 4 different decades.
Yeah, that is
Like
insane.
that is just wild, and I think he's gonna be the only player to ever do it. Because unless we're talking about LeBron playing, he would have to play like 5 more seasons to have played in 4 different decades, which I don't see that happening. So look at Vince Carter, one Rookie of the Year, 8-time All-Star. When he played, when he was in his prime, like the scoring wasn't, insanely high. So he only averaged 16.7 a game for his career. But
I mean, he had 10 seasons where he wasn't doing much, though.
Yeah. He did. He was a key piece in them winning gold in the Olympics, and so in 2000, so very well deserved. And then Chauncey Billups, who definitely seems like a U type of player. Like I think Chauncey Billups was definitely one of your one of your type of guys.
Oh yeah, I love
mean,
Chauncey Billups.
you talk about that Chauncey Billups and Rip Hamilton combination was something that I kind of, when I first memories I have of watching basketball, from a young age was watching that Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Rasheed Wallace Pistons team. So it's like,
And Ben Wallace. Don't forget Ben
and
Wallace.
I forgot about Ben Wallace.
And Tayshaun Prince. I remember that
Tayshaun
five.
Prince, like that team, like that team was something special. In my opinion, Chauncey Billups, his name is Mr. Big Shot. How can you have a nickname of Mr. Big Shot and not be in the Hall of Fame? Like, so I think, definitely well deserved for both players.
Yeah, and I always find it interesting to see when guys that I didn't grow up play get in as well, because I like reading about them, honestly. Like even Michael Cooper, I've heard the name before, but I mean, he made 8 all NBA defensive teams. He won Defensive Player of the Year in '87. It sounds like my kind of guy, so I didn't get to watch him play, but I feel like I would have enjoyed it. And then Walter Davis is the Phoenix Suns all-time leading scorer, which is pretty significant. So you learn little cool things like that. Vince Carter, not only on the court, but it feels like even what he did with the dunk contest and bringing life to that as well during his era too is significant, because it's not always just about what's on the court, right? I mean, it's just about your career and what you contributed to the game as a whole. And even so interesting of note, Jerry West got in for a second time as a contributor to the game with his time with the Lakers as well.
That's what it was like. I was like, hold up.
We didn't mention Jerry West. That bum. He's a bum.
Like, what?
But yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, like the Vince Carter. Just the one thing about like when you have a player, like when you think of that old school Toronto uniform.
Oh yeah.
Like, you think of Vince Carter. Like that's the first name that pops in 99.9% of people's heads when they see that uniform. And when you have a player, that's that memorable and that, iconic, and you would assume one player with a jersey like that. I mean it's definitely a no-brainer.
So I'm a hater if I say Chauncey Billups isn't a Hall of Famer then. So I shouldn't say that.
You don't think Chauncey Billups is a Hall of Famer?
I mean, not really. I loved Chauncey Billups and I loved watching him, but if we're going by the definition of what a Hall of Famer is according to the NBA, like I think the NBA has brought the bar really low, if we're being honest about it. I think that the NBA of all the sports lets in a lot of really good players, and I understand he won a championship and was, a really important piece. But when you just look at his career as a whole, averaging 15 points and I don't know, like he didn't really make an all NBA team, never a first team defensive player. Like he was a great captain, a great leader, but is he one of the best? Was he one of the best players of his era? Was he ever even a top 20 player in the league? I don't think he was even in the top 20 at any point in his career. So to me, yes, guys like him have been continually getting into the Hall of Fame. So based on who's been let in the past, he absolutely should be in. But I guess I'm a traditional baseball Hall of Fame guy where it feels impossible to get in the Baseball Hall of Fame sometimes, and they are uber strict with it. And I think it should be. We're talking about the legends and the best of the best that have ever played. And if you can't say a guy was never a top 20 player when he played, that guy shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. And I love, if I was building a championship team during that time, I would want Chauncey Billups on my team. But does that make him a Hall of Fame player? I personally don't think so. But I mean, I'm not a voter, so.
I mean, it also you gotta. To me, and it feels weird that I'm the one kind of defending Chauncey Billups here.
Yeah.
Feels kind of weird because he's not really my style of player, but you kind of, to me, it's kind of more, with some players, it's more about the eye test. and not necessarily, you don't necessarily, like, you can't necessarily just use numbers, and stats to judge, I mean, that's the easy way to do it, but like that's also, like, stats can be empty, like, by that logic, I mean, there's like Michael Carter Williams should be in the Hall of Fame, because of the first,
Okay, well that's going a little too far.
But I'm just saying, that's just goes like it to me, like, it's more than just like numbers, in my opinion. Like, it's about, like,
Well, I don't disagree with no, and I mean I just said the same thing with Vince Carter, right? With like what he did for the dunk contest and being kind of a face like that. I don't know. I just feel like they let a lot of people in for when the bar should be higher. So
a
yeah, I mean,
Finals MVP automatically gets you, like, like, if you win, that means you were the best player on a championship team.
yeah, I mean, I think part of it too is it just feels like I don't know if there was any one player that was most important on that team. Like that was a true definition of like a team effort to win a championship. No one ever thought like there was a superstar on that team. It was really like they played. I don't know if we've ever seen a team just play more as a unit, as a starting five. Like no, it was team above self, and I mean he definitely was a big part of that, but I don't know. It feels like he was never a superstar. Like, come on, Chauncey Billups was not a superstar. So we're letting non-superstars into the Hall of Fame, which it is what it is. But yeah. Anyway, I have to at least throw something. We can't be boring and agree on everything. That's no fun. I am going to scold you though while we're recording because you put together the agenda for this, and you did not mention Lindsey Harding. And so Lindsey Harding is the coach of the Stockton Kings in the G League, and she's the first woman to ever win Coach of the Year in men's basketball. And she's also interviewing for the Hornets head coaching position this upcoming week. So we could potentially have the first woman NBA coach, but she at least deserves recognition. I'm not going to claim that I know a lot about Lindsey Harding, but I did see in the news that she's the first woman in men's basketball to win any sort of award. And it was at the G League level, but it sounds like she is going to find her way into the NBA either this year or at least very, very soon. So that's at least of note.
Yeah, I mean,
No, it's
you
okay. You're
feel kind of
sexist. That's
bad.
fine.
I mean, but I mean, yeah, I mean, do I think she's gonna get the job, the Hornets? I mean, it feels like, and this is what the unfortunate thing, if Becky Hammond wasn't gonna get a head coaching job, which she certainly should have, and I think part of it is Greg Popovich's fault because he's just stubborn self.
Probably, yeah.
Decided not to, but like, that's basically who's going to be that groundbreaker. Like, who's going to be like that first woman, head coach at the NBA level. And if it's not Lindsey Harding, I don't know when it's gonna happen. So I hope she gets it, but we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, whatever happened to Becky Hammond? Because she was getting head coaching interviews like left and right, and then all of a sudden, is she even coaching anywhere right now? I'm not even sure. Okay, she's the head coach of the Las Vegas Aces in the WNBA right now. So she is coaching, but um, yeah, she never. Yeah, I kind of forgot that she was a part of that. So we'll see. It will happen eventually, but I mean, just the fact that she won Coach of the Year as a woman, honestly, and the other coaches and um, people, media with the NBA G League are the ones voting on that. So the fact that she has that level of respect, I think, is definitely a big check in the right direction for her. So we'll see what happens there, but that's how I want to wrap it up here. So I think that
just one more. I had to go over and scroll over to the basketball reference page on Chauncey Billups to see what exact accolades he accrued during his career. So he was a 5-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, 2-time All-Defense.
Yeah, but what? Whoa. That is very misleading because when you say All-NBA, it was the third team and the second team defensively. You can't even make the first team.
Okay, and that's just part of it. Also during that stretch, I mean, he did have a stretch where he finished 5th in MVP voting, then he finished 11th in MVP voting, and then 2008 he finished 6th. So he did have a 4-year stretch, and then the 1 year he didn't wasn't top MVP consideration. He did still make an All-Star team. So he did have a 4-year stretch where he was easily a top 20 player in the league. Did have a 4-year stretch where he was a top.
I don't know, top 20. It may be top 12, but even
like I said, he had 3 out of the 4 seasons he finished top 11 in MVP voting.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, based off the criteria that the Hall of Fame has set, he should be a Hall of Famer. Like when you look at over the last few years who's been led in the Hall of Fame and what it is, yeah, he should be. But if I was creating my own Hall of Fame for the best of the best, he would not be in there. Now, if it was for like just great teammates and people that I would want on my team, he would be in the Hall of Fame. He won, and I was just scrolling through some things too. He won like, Sportsman of the Year, Teammate of the Year, like everything that I want in my point guard on a team. But it just, I don't, was he that top tier player that deserves a legendary status as a Hall of Famer? I question that personally. So I mean, I think I'm in the minority. I haven't seen anybody else say that, but I think we've just gotten used to just more people being led. I mean, 13 people in 1 year tells you all you need to know. That's way too many people to let into the Hall of Fame. Like, come on now. Like, that's crazy in general. So, anyway.
Yeah.
What do I know?
I just had the.
No.
You did. It was a bit insulting to say that he was never a top 20 player in the league when I just had to correct you on that.
I mean, that's still subjective. I mean, we'd have to go through those specific years. Let's go back to 2004 and list out the top 20 players in the league, and then we'll see, I guess.
No, there wasn't 2004. He made second team all defense. So 2005, the year after they won the championship, is when he was 5th in MVP voting.
It's probably, I mean, if he was in the top 20, he is closer, is he like number 15 for a few years then? I don't know. Anyway, that's enough about Chauncey Billups. And just as a celebration, he's going to get fired from the Trailblazers this offseason because that's been rumors that I've read that they might not want to bring him back. So congratulations, you're in the Hall of Fame, but now you're fired. So alrighty. I think that's it, though. We appreciate you guys for listening, and we will see you next time.
Yep.